I've had a few people asking me how I make my eco-dyed images, so I figured the best way is probably to make a video to show you what I get up to. I'm starting off with some Arches paper. This is 300 GSM, which I find is a good strength to be able to survive being in water for a long time without falling apart at the seams. So what I'm doing now is making a sandwich basically with the leaves and the paper. These are some different leaves I collected walking just down at the local park. I have tried to make sure that I haven't collected anything toxic. I'm not always terribly good at leaf identification, so having my husband who is have a check through them is usually a good idea. You don't want to be boiling up anything that's going to release terrible fumes. So I think what I've got here is some she oak and some beech leaves and some other bits and pieces. So I'm just going to, having made a mess, take my leaves and sandwich them in between the pieces of paper. So basically the print's going to be made by the stuff touching the paper being pressed into it and the dyes and the chemicals which are in the leaves being released. So I want to get as much stuff touching the paper as I can, and then I fold over the next side to make a sandwich. You can be fairly restrained, or you can just stuff as much stuff as you possibly can into them and see what happens. Here are some bean pods which make quite an interesting dye. Leaves often seem to work best in the autumn when they're dried. Having said that, I got some beautiful colour out of fresh carrot leaves last week, so basically it's just a case of trying and experimenting. This is kind of half magic, half alchemy, half science, half art, which I know is far too many halves to make a whole, but that's kind of what it feels like. So you can get kind of fussy if you want to about how you arrange them, or you can just bung it all in and fold it over. I can also pop some bits and pieces down onto the plate. Actually, I do find sometimes the wood ends up taking lovely prints. And then I'm going to put a second piece of wood on top to make a sandwich, and I'm going to clamp it. The clamping is pretty important because by pressing it down you get the print. So I've discovered these recently. They're just clamps from the DIY store. They're pretty good, but they don't fit into my pot very well. Bulldog clips also work quite nicely, and rustling my plastic bag in the background. These things for holding tablecloths and artist paintwork, they're probably the best thing I've found. Unfortunately, one of them got away. Oh, and if I clamp the short sides, then it actually increases the possibility of me actually fitting everything into my dye pot. The metal also actually has an effect on everything that goes into the dye pot, so it becomes part of the chemistry. It will infuse the water, especially if you're using iron and things that go rusty. I find it tends to give a darkening effect, which personally I quite like. I'll add iron rods sometimes as well, or wrap my paper around iron. Something else I've tried is wrapping paper around wooden dowel and tying it up with strings so you avoid metal altogether. Even the metal of the pan that you're using is going to have an effect, so if you can come up with something special like a copper pan, that will also change the effect of what you're doing. So here I am heating up my pan of water. You want it to be pretty full, or at least full enough to pretty much cover the wedge of paper that you're putting in to be dyed. I'm heating it up to probably a gentle simmer rather than a boil. I think sometimes if it gets too hot you can actually end up destroying the colours, particularly if you're using fresh greenery. You can see from the bottom of the pan that it's got discoloured from being repeatedly used. You really want to be having a pan devoted just to your dye work, so you know, grabbing something inexpensive from the second-hand shop isn't a bad idea. I trashed this one. And I'm just going to pop my sandwich in there. It's covered over, let it finish heating up, and check it every few minutes. Add cold water again if you need to. That doesn't seem to actually affect the dye process, so it's not going to look very exciting for a while, so we'll leave it there and I'll come back a bit later when there's a bit more going on. Okay, well here we go. I have just taken it off of the hob. As you might be able to see, the water is pretty dark, which means that something's happened, even if it's just colour coming out of the boards. Normally I would give it longer than this, but dinner's almost ready and it's going to get dark soon, so I'm going to call it a day now. So we'll have to have a look and see what has happened and whether we're in luck or not. Yeah, you can definitely see when I take it out the dark colour of the tannins in the water, so hopefully, fingers crossed, something will have happened. Okay, so I've got some water in the sink to give it an initial rinse. Here is the first moment of truth. Off come the clips. And off comes the board. Woohoo! Awesome. Oh, the pods have had a little bit of an effect. That leaf I like. There's the back side. Oh, we're just going to give it a swish because it's kind of hot. And I'm loving those heart shapes. Okay, so last step is just a final mordant to try and fix the colour. So I've added a few squirts of salt, just table salt, no need for anything fancy. And I'm just going to very gently, having got all of the last bits of moss and leaf, give my paper a gentle rinse.